On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Good morning, everyone. You're watching Import Export here on Ticker TV. I'm your host, Lawrence Christophels. Last week we had a China trade special episode. This week is all about Indonesia. So there's so many fantastic opportunities that are emerging with Indonesia. They've been, in many ways, a sleeping giant for Australian trade, and there's a whole up-and-coming IA-CEPA, a new economic trade partnership that's about to be ratified between the two countries as well. So today we've got a lineup of really valuable, important guests who can help us and you, the viewers, to understand how you can tap into those opportunities, what you need to do to really embrace those, and how to succeed between Australia and Indonesia. To kick it all off, we've got our first guest, Mr. Ivan Tandyo, the CEO of Navanti Holdings. Hi, Ivan. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Lawrence. Good morning.
Yeah. Great. Now, Ivan, we've got so many things to talk about in Indonesia, and
yes,
we have to condense each section to about 10 minutes. But let's kick off with, what are the local understanding? How important is it to succeed in Indonesia? It's been, as I said in the intro, a bit of a sleeping giant. Australian
yes.
companies have been a little bit wary.
Yes.
How important is that Indonesian cultural awareness and not local knowledge?
Yes. Well, the good thing is Indonesia, I think, is a very untapped market. It's a huge market, 260 over million people, the fourth largest in the world,
yeah.
right? And but it's so important. That's why if we want to penetrate this market, I think that now is the best time, because historically it's been really, you're right, there's so many probably upset coming in, how difficult it is to go into Indonesia.
Yeah.
And that's why we sit here in Navanti, we try to become the catalyst.
Yeah.
We need to, we help people to understand how to deal with Indonesia, because they do the business differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
The culturally different, the background, the behavior of the investment different, and just the way they do business very different, even the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
I remember the first time we went into the Indonesian market, I myself, we built a PMA. PMA is an investment company with JV with an Australian company.
Yeah.
So we built a manufacturing plant in Indonesia, and it was very difficult because it was close to 10 years ago. But now the good news is the circumstances have changed.
Yep.
The new things coming up, and this IA-CEPA, very exciting. So I think this is such a good time to go into, but it's so important for you to understand the risk, to understand how you go in there, and how do you actually understand the market. Indonesia has like around 300 ethnicity.
Yeah.
Archipelagos, ethnicity, and every area speaks different language.
Very different to Australia.
Yes, even the language itself, and well, now they're getting better with English. But if you're talking about manufacturing, sometimes their stuff still very early, at early stage of understanding English. Then,
And Ivan, there's obviously a growing appetite for Indonesian consumers to work with Australia, to look at Australian products and services. I think that's why this IA-CEPA is going to open up and expand those opportunities.
Oh yes.
Tell me a little bit about the historical, cultural bridge that, we know so many Indonesian students have been here in Australia. How does that impact their consumers and buying behaviours?
Oh, well, it impacted a lot, because they are here, like I myself, I had the privilege. I'm proud to be Indonesian, but at the same time, it's a privilege for me to be able to live here. I studied here in Australia, and I remember those 4 or 5 years are crucial for you to understand how Australians do things and what is Australia. And a lot of these kids, because we deal with a lot of this students as well from Indonesia, since we have the program that train students from Indonesia for a couple of months here, how to run business and stuff like that. These kids, they are here in Australia, and they start to understand the culture, and they fall in love. They actually fell in love with Australia, and a lot of them want to stay here as well. But when they move back to Indonesia, a lot of them, they take over their parents' business.
That's right.
And that's the next generation. Those are people who will actually trade with us.
Well, I think that when you ask an average Australian what they think of Indonesia, the first top of mind is Bali. They think about the holidays and all those sort of things. But what's been, as you said before, untapped is the business and investment opportunities.
Yes.
And what I've loved about, and I'll ask you to talk a little bit more about this in detail, Navanti, you talked about your experience of taking 5 years to get to understand the Australian market. What you're offering with Navanti is fast tracking that. So if an Australian company or an Indonesian company, you take all that experience, you've got your team around you, and then you actually give them a a whole footprint incubator on the ground in both markets. So tell us about how that works.
That's right. Well, I have my notes here. One of the things the key element that we do in Navanti, we want to become the catalyst for this to happen, for these two countries, this neighboring country to happen. And I can be more excited about the IA-CEPA of it. So we help the market to understand each other. So we help them to understand, and we help them to source, because sourcing is a different thing in Indonesia. You have to know where to look and all that, and what kind of industry that is being established. Or if you go into a market, say for example, when I came in 10 years ago, the industry, because we built a manufacturing plant for commercial kitchen appliance, and that's very high tech, and it's kind of new to Indonesia, and it's quite difficult 10 years ago to source even the parts, the component, and stuff like that. You know, so we need to address that before you go inside. So we can help you with that as well, and we help you to connect and how to connect with Indonesian, not just who you know, but how to connect with the one you know, and as well how to negotiate. We negotiate differently.
Very differently.
Very differently. Very differently. Sometimes we negotiate over lunch and stuff. And the last one is how to mitigate your risk. So it's so important. And then we have the business hub, you know, the 11 space. With the 11 space, it sits there as a bridge. So it's a physical bridge where you don't need to. We want to create an effective, cost-efficient linking bridge for temporary measure. Before you actually establish the whole thing, you don't even have to find your office. We provide you the office. We provide you with the HR, with the resources, and the help temporary while you're still building up your business. So it's very cost efficient.
It's a plug and play model.
Plug and play model. And reduce your risk.
Absolutely, and I think, and fast track success, because one of the things, Ivan, is I've worked with exporters for over 20 years. The biggest mistake, or things that they always overlook, they get excited about. They'll go to a trade show, they'll go to an exhibition, they'll come back with all these business cards, and they love it. They think it's fantastic. What are these opportunities? I want to do all this work. They haven't done their market research. They haven't done their local costings.
That's right.
They haven't looked at the competitor analysis. Who else is in the market?
The logistics strategy.
Logistics strategy, supply chain,
so
distribution, communication strategy.
That's right.
And what you've got with the whole team of Navanti Holdings is that you've got this, just like ATLC does with supply chain.
That's right.
You've got an ecosystem of business support mechanisms around that.
That's right. That's right. We try to be the end-to-end solution. So we try to provide a solution rather than just a product. We want to take your hand and bring you into Indonesia. We also at the same time we've brought a couple of Indonesian companies to Australia as well. And we work together with yourself, and the government is very supportive. We are link with every department who's related to this. And
I think the contacts that you have through Navanti, both on the ground here in Australia, you know, your breadth of industry is quite diverse. You've got property, you've got food, you've got tech, you've got IT, you've got a whole diverse coverage here in Australia and in Indonesia. And again, the biggest challenge for anyone doing international trade is trust and contacts and communication, because what we interpret here in Australia is if we're saying something, we want to make sure that's understood in the right way on the other side of the fence with your partners overseas. So miscommunication is a big challenge for any international trade, but especially for, let's say, startup or novice exporters, or people who are really starting to build that international trade experience. The ability to lean on your expertise, your teams, is very, very powerful.
I love it the way you put it. You use the word trust. I think talking about the potential nowadays, probably people would know it's over. Indonesia has so much potential. We'll be the largest, fifth largest economy by 2030.
I know.
Fifth largest, can you imagine? And if you're looking for manufacturing and consumer market, 267 million people, and they're consuming because the demographic are young. They're young, they are spenders, and they are probably we are one of the largest middle class in the whole world. So there are a lot of energy. The Asia, people call it, Indonesia is the energy of Asia.
Right, really? Okay.
Energy of Asia. So potential is there, but again, you're right. But the next layer, the deeper layer, is what make it more challenging, which is how do you build that trust? How do you understand and actually can relate? We want to do everything in a long-term perspective.
And I think the way that you can sort of advise and guide. Mentor is another really good word that I think Navanti does beautifully well.
Thank you.
And I live it. I'm part of the 11th space quite proudly, and ATLC's house there. And I see the way that you mentor all the Indonesian companies coming into the Australian market, and I know how you do that for Australian companies going offshore. Tell us about the new office. I know we probably had some delays with COVID, but we've got that new office coming up in the 11th space equivalent in Jakarta.
In Jakarta. Yeah, it's looking awesome. Yeah. Sorry, I haven't sent you the photo, but right. I just got the photo a couple of weeks ago where it's done. It's almost done. It's twice the size that we have in Australia.
Wow, really? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. That will connect the physically both of the two offices, which is one in Collins and one in Indonesia.
Fantastic.
And yeah, same thing. Everything that we offer here down in Australia, we're gonna do it there. Yep. So we're gonna do a lot of activations, a lot of programs, a lot of consultations, research, and just helping out business.
Networking.
Very practical. Networking. Just practical things. We want to cut the story short. If you're going to Indonesia, we want to help your objectives to go into Indonesia and make it faster.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that's what's different about the 11th space is that there's co-working spaces all over the place and that had a major rise over the last few years. What's very different about the 11th space is that you're a real incubator. You do your own TED Talks, you do your own investment opportunity presentations, pitch fests. So you guys do things that I love being a part of, and I love to actually speak to our network as well, because like I said, co-working's co-working. You might have a drink on a Friday night, but what does it do really? Yeah. But what you guys are doing is really stoking the fire about, okay, well, have you thought about your pitch? Have you thought about your investment strategies, your market research, or even your IT?
Yes.
You've got everything from web designers to videographers right through to
everything that you need.
Everything you need, yeah. So it's basically a Bunnings for market international trade.
And the latest hype that we have, the way we also do this bilateral Indonesia and Australia is by training a lot of, we create a lot of program, and the latest program that we have is the NBL, Incubation Business Launchpad. It's a 3-month program, and we have 15 businesses that we are incubating at the moment in Australia, and there are a lot of them are Indonesian people. They're Indonesian and they want to invest in Australia. They want to create business in Australia. And that brings a lot of investment to Australia as well. And we're going to do it soon when the Indonesian office is finished. We're going to bring a lot of Australians doing that, the young ones.
Yeah, that's right. That's the future.
That's the future.
One of the things, Ivan, before we wrap up on today's segment, and we'll get you again very soon, and we want to keep abreast of all the new changes, especially as the IA-CEPA starts to evolve and ratify. You'll be our regular Indonesian expert, because we need to keep on top of that market, even more so because this last comment I want to ask you about. So China, everyone knows over the last few months, people, and we had that episode last week around the China trade special, the impacts that it's had on Australian supply chains, on global supply chains, but particularly for us here in Australia. It's forced companies to rethink their Asia strategy. Now, Indonesia it's a sleeping giant. I mean, as you say, the market is huge, but it's a bit more complex, and you need to have the right strategies. What's your advice for companies who want to look at Indonesia? They might be already sourcing from China. Now's the time to compare the two. Look at let's look at Indonesia as an alternative, even from an export perspective. If I had my export strategy to China, Indonesia has got the springboard into ASEAN, 10 markets.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. You're right. You put it that right word. Indonesia, I think, is the gateway to the Asian market. You got Indonesia. This is how I put it. You got Indonesia. You got the whole ASEAN, right? And it's the biggest market as well. I think Indonesian this is the Indonesian time. It's for us to shine at the moment. Well, China is becoming less and less. It's not it's more expensive now. It's not like before. Back then, that's the main attractions. But I think Indonesia is very competitive in the minimum wages and the labor, and now the skilled workers are getting more and more available in there, and I experienced it firsthand. So I think Indonesia is the best to go. I'm probably biased, but I'm Indonesian, but I think Indonesian is the best to go. One of the things is that when you go to Indonesia, you don't just export back to your market. This is what I've done. So we've in partnership with an Australian, one of the oldest and the biggest Australian commercial kitchen appliance, BNS Australia, and we don't just go in there to actually export some of the stuff back, but we enjoy to sell the local market.
Right,
So
yeah.
the local market in Indonesia is even bigger than the Australian market.
Yeah.
So when you go in there, you don't look at doing this thing,
Yeah.
trading, and but make use of the consumer markets in Indonesia.
Yep,
Yeah.
fantastic. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure, as it always is, Ivan, to have you on the show. And as I mentioned, Indonesia is going to be a hot topic for the very short, medium, long-term future for Australian business. So I do hope that you can come back on the show on a regular basis, keep us
I'd love
updated,
to, yes.
and really be that eyes and ears for the Indonesian opportunities.
Thank you.
Great.
Sure.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you.
Ivan.
Thank you so much, Lawrence.
Great.
Appreciate it. It's good to be here.
So thanks. You've heard about all those great opportunities and the support mechanisms that Navanti can offer you. Coming up after this short break, we've got Muni Rahim from the Indonesian Consulate here in Melbourne. So join us, stick around, and we'll see you in a few minutes' time.
We all have a big idea.
When I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a builder. Everyone working outside, music playing.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be an ice cream man who offered free refills.
But what does it really take to be an entrepreneur?
You got to have balls.
To be a startup founder, it's definitely not for everyone. It's insanely challenging.
No, balls and brains.
A brand new show to inspire bright ideas.
You know, being really determined and resilient to make it happen.
The show is for people in our position, in the trenches, trying to build a brand.
The real story about startup life from the guys who founded Bay Juice.
The best day of our life with Bay Juice is when Dan Murphy's called us to say we're going to trial your product in store.
There's an insane amount of challenges, but we always see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Ticker Launch with Liam Gostenik and Tim O'Sullivan. Every week on Ticker.
Hey, good morning. Ticker's new breakfast show.
Well, most of the time in the morning, I annoy people.
I think Ben is so fabulous. He is wild, he is warm, he is witty.
The first time I met Alana, I realised I wanted to have a drink with her.
You never know what's going to come out of his mouth.
Kick off your morning with Ticker Jumpstart.
We are playing in uncharted territory.
This preparation takes me all night.
It doesn't matter how long I take, because Ben will always take longer.
Ticker Jumpstart with Benjamin Norris and Alana McLean.
You're going to get some different stuff with us, and we're going to be unapologetic for it.
You do realise it's the morning, so you don't need to be the human coffee.
On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Import Export here on Ticker TV. I'm your host, Lawrence Christophels. Today's show is all about Indonesia-Australia trade and investment opportunities. We've got the IA-CEPA coming up, hopefully ratified, I think by mid to end of July this year, so only 6 to 8 weeks away. Really exciting times ahead between the two markets. You've just heard from Ivan Tandyo, the CEO of Navanti Holdings, about how that bridge and gateway is so important to really fast track those opportunities and open those up. Now I've got the absolute pleasure to have Muni Rahim, who's here from the Indonesia Consulate here in Melbourne. So Muni, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Great. Muni, can I ask you, please explain your role with the consulate and why it's so important between trade and investment opportunities?
Okay. First of all, I would like to explain about the role of the Indonesian Consulate General in Melbourne.
Great.
So Indonesian Consulate General in Melbourne is in charge of promoting cooperation between Indonesia and Australia, in particular between Indonesia and Victoria and Tasmania, in the field of economy, social and culture, including education, and also consular affairs. I'm in charge of promotion of the economic affairs. It's cover investment, tourism and trade.
Fantastic. So with all the IA-CEPA talk, and I know that we had the presidential visit not long ago as well, is there a lot of anticipation and excitement about the IA-CEPA is in Indonesia? Is it here in Australia as well?
Yes, of course. I think there are a lot of optimism. Before I jump to that issue, maybe I would like a little bit to touch upon the posture of Indonesia.
Please, yes.
Yeah, Indonesia is having population of more than 260 million people, which is 84% below 54 years old. So you can imagine it is very young, yeah, and then many opportunities that Indonesia and Australia can fall. And secondly, based on the research prediction, Indonesia will be the fifth largest GDP in the world by 2030.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, COVID-19 affect very much the global economy, including Indonesia. But from that prediction, we can see that the right track of Indonesian trajectory in the future.
Yeah.
So I think the bilateral relation between Indonesia and Australia will reach to the milestone with the entry into force of the CEPA, Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which will be entry into force on 5th of July.
Yep.
I think this kinds of agreement is very unique compared to the previous free trade agreement. Yes, why? Because this is comprehensive, because it's not only about trade barrier, trade barrier lift, but it is also about the investment and then capacity building. And then besides that, it also covers about electronic commerce, which not contained in the previous free trade agreement.
Yeah.
So Indonesia see Australia as a source of education, and then source of science and technology, and also source of investment. So Australia is very important for Indonesian economic development. And then, as you might aware that CEPA is opening wider opportunity for Australia and Indonesia businessmen in the future. It is not about the long-term cooperation. It is not 5 years or 10 years, but beyond that kinds of time frame. And then also the CEPA also open opportunity for Indonesia and Australia to build new economic powerhouse in the region.
Yeah.
It is not only about Indonesia export to Australia or Australia export to Indonesia, but how Australia and Indonesia work together to create, to create the economic powerhouse to contribute to the global value chain. How Indonesia can produce, and how Indonesia, in cooperation with Australia, can produce the manufacture which we can sell in the global market.
Yeah, I think that what we class in supply chain as value-added services.
Yes.
So Australia could partially produce some products or provide some raw material.
Yes.
Indonesia, companies would work with them on a joint venture.
Yes.
They do finished goods or even partial more completion.
Yes.
And that goes to a whole global supply chain, global value chain.
Yes, and then as we might aware that CEPA also reduce many tariffs. Like for example, Australia wheat can enter Indonesia with 0 tariff.
Wow.
Yes, before maybe 5% tariff, and it create the uncompetitiveness of the Indonesian product in the global market. You can imagine if Indonesia or Australian businessmen make investment in Indonesia, build a factory for noodles, for example, and the wheat is coming from Australia, and then with zero tariff, the noodle will be cheap compared to the other product.
Right.
So Indonesia and Australia can sell the product not only in Indonesia but Australia and the rest of the world.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it's going to open up so many fantastic opportunities.
Yeah.
Indonesia has been on Australia's doorstep. It's been a major market. It's been in many ways a very challenging market to navigate. When you look at Australian business, and I've worked with so many Australian companies over the years where they'd love to get into Indonesia. That's why Ivan's discussion previously was so important. How to navigate that. But I should say it has been a bit of a challenge, Ivan Muni, about how to set up a bank account, how to employ staff, how to repatriate funds.
Yes.
It has been a little bit difficult in the past. How is the IA-CEPA going to improve that? And do you see that some of that red tape, if you want to call it that, has that improved?
Yeah. Actually, the government of Indonesia, and especially our President Joko Widodo, put emphasis very much how to create the good climate for investment and business in Indonesia, because we understand that investment and international business contribute a lot to the prosperity of Indonesia. So by this, Indonesia already introduced, we call it the national single window of investment.
Okay. Yep.
So, for example, if Australia business to come to Indonesia, they would like to invest. So they don't need take a long time to get, tax number, identification number, and so on. They can come to the investment coordinating board office, and then they can wait 3 hours. They can get some kinds of 9 documents.
Correct. In 3 hours.
It's very within 3 hours. But of course there are some requirements. But at least this is one of how Indonesian government put emphasis to support the doing business in Indonesia. Secondly, Indonesia also introduced one-stop service centers. So if you would like to invest in Indonesia, you just come to the investment coordinating board office, and then you can handle or process the license there in one-stop center.
Great.
So the center consists of many, something like 22 ministries, related ministries.
In one spot.
In one spot. So
Fantastic.
you don't need to go to the Ministry of Finance, tax office. You just come to the coordinating board office, and then you can discuss or you can consult with the officer, professional officer there, how to
Like a case manager?
Yes, something like that. And then you can also use online application. So you can track your application through online.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I think this is one of the major a big leap that Indonesia would like to offer for the foreign investor.
Great. Ivan Muni, I know that coronavirus has impacted all markets, all countries. There's probably been a lot of things planned, especially in line with the ratification of the IA-CEPA, to have bilateral trade missions, delegations, events. Have those things been, had to be put off obviously, but what have you got lined up over the next 6 months or 12 months to really take advantage of the new IA-CEPA ratification?
Yeah, actually there are a lot of impact of the our project and program how to promote cooperation between Australia or between Victoria and Indonesia. If I may touch upon the issue of the visit of our West Java governor to Melbourne on February, I think, the middle of February, and then the visit of our Minister of Fishery in the end of February, where during the visit he visited also he visited Tasmania and Melbourne. During the visit, he explored the possibility of cooperation in terms of cultivation of lobster.
Right.
Yes, in Indonesia, and then besides that, he also visit some company here in Melbourne, who offer the giant cold store somewhere here, because Indonesia as an archipelagic state, put very importance of the how to establish, how to strengthen the fishery sector. So I think Australia will be very important partner for Indonesia in developing our fishery sector in the future. So it is hopeful that in the near future, the follow-up of the visit of the Minister of Fishery will be done to realize what we are would like to create in the future.
Great. I think that as we discussed with Ivan just now, there's so many opportunities, and companies here in Australia, consumers even in Australia, are looking outside of China as other markets. Indonesia is a huge untapped market. So we are very much looking forward to discovering more about the industries, which sectors, things like those zero tariffs on wheat, the logistics and infrastructure projects that the companies could collaborate on as well. A whole range of cross-training, financial investment between both markets. So some really exciting times ahead, and we'd love to have more input from you as the months proceed and as things get back to some sort of normality. We'd love to stay in touch with you and have you back on the show. And if you've got trade delegations, trade missions coming up, please let us know, and we'll make the audience aware of that so they can engage with you and come along to meet the right people from Indonesia as well.
My pleasure.
Great. Thanks so much, Ivan Muni. It's been an absolute delight to have you on, and really privileged to have you on representing the consulate here.
Thank you so much.
And we'll keep in touch and speak to you very, very soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
So there you have it. There's some really amazing support that's been established with the economic partnership. The Indonesian government's doing a lot of great initiatives to make sure the business is becoming easier and smoother to take advantage of those opportunities. So stay abreast of this IA-CEPA. 7th of July or 5th of July, I think it's going to open up a whole range of new doors. Stick around after the break. We've actually got the National President of the Australian Indonesia Business Council, Mr. Phil Turtle, joining us to discuss even more around the IA-CEPA. We'll see you.
We all have a big idea.
When I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a builder. Everyone working outside, music playing.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be an ice cream man who offered free refills.
But what does it really take to be an entrepreneur?
You got to have balls.
To be a startup founder, it's definitely not for everyone. It's insanely challenging.
No, balls and brains.
A brand new show to inspire bright ideas.
Being really determined and resilient to make it happen.
The show is for people in our position, in the trenches, trying to build a brand.
The real story about startup life from the guys who founded Bay Juice.
The best day of our life with Bay Juice is when Dan Murphy's called us to say we're going to trial your product in store.
There's an insane amount of challenges, but we always see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Ticker Launch with Liam Gostinik and Tim O'Sullivan. Every week on Ticker.
Hey, good morning. Ticker's new breakfast show.
Well, most of the time in the morning, I annoy people.
I think Ben is so fabulous. He is wild, he is warm, he is witty.
The first time I met Alana, I realised I wanted to have a drink with her.
You never know what's going to come out of his mouth.
Kick off your morning with Ticker Jumpstart.
We are playing in uncharted territory.
This preparation takes me all night.
It doesn't matter how long I take, because Ben will always take longer.
Ticker Jumpstart with Benjamin Norris and Alana McLean.
You're going to get some different stuff with us, and we're going to be unapologetic for it.
You do realise it's the morning, so you don't need to be the human coffee.
There are now.
On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Import Export here on Ticker TV. I'm your host, Lawrence Christophels. As I mentioned from the outset, today's episode is all about opportunities between Australia and Indonesia, and we're really celebrating the up-and-coming ratification of the IA-CEPA. To join us now, we've got the National President of the Australian Indonesia Business Council, Mr. Phil Turtle. Hi, Phil. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Lawrence, and always a pleasure to be with you, although this time across on the other side of the country.
Yes, always.
Like a lot of other people, yes.
Great to chat, mate, and thanks for getting up extra early in WA. So really appreciate that, and always great to have you on the show. So thanks so much. So Phil, I know that we've got so much great opportunities emerging with the IA-CEPA. But before we kick into the IA-CEPA, for the viewers' benefit, please let us know about your role with the ARBC and the ARBC's role and how it's played an important part, and will actually play an even more important part in the future opportunities here between the two countries.
Absolutely, Lawrence. Well, I have the great privilege to be serving as the National President of the Australia-Indonesia Business Council. I must say, though, at the outset, it's following on from Ivan's presentation, Ivan Muni, the great energy and enthusiasm they bring is fantastic. Our organisation is the peak membership-based promoter of trade and investment between our two countries. We have a chapter in every state and territory around our country. And affiliates with our counterparts in Indonesia, who the Indonesia Australia Business Council also represented in 5 countries. Across our membership, we go from the very, very big end of town, the big publicly listed mining businesses, banks, professional services companies and the like, but all the way through the spectrum, through to small, medium and even micro businesses across all industries, through education, mining, mets, banking, finance, food and agribusiness, legal and other professional services, engineering, tourism and general import-export of products between the two countries. As I said, we've got strong linkage with our affiliates, and like with Ivan Muni and the consulate that she serves in Melbourne, we're very close with government agencies, both in Indonesia and Australia, and work on a daily basis with them. So very excited that we're at this point with the trade agreement, which has been a long time in the making. I think I've been involved in it for over a decade myself.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because I know you've been one of the spearheads to really see this be realised. So congratulations to you personally, because I know how much hard work you put into it, and you've been a real reason why this has come together so successfully. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the key benefits and outcomes that the IA-CEPA will bring to Australian companies and to Indonesian companies as well?
Yeah, well, just introducing into that, I've been interested in the use of the term a sleeping giant for Indonesia. I might counter that it's actually Australia that's been sleeping in all of this, that Indonesia has been a giant on our doorstep for a long, long time. And its economic growth, its reforms, again, as Ivan Muni mentions, in improvements in ease of doing business and in international investment rankings. Australian business for a long time hasn't recognised Indonesia's value as a market and trading partner, so has probably beaten a path more to other markets in China and elsewhere. So this trade agreement is a terrific opportunity for Australian business to perhaps have some of its attention refocused a little bit closer to home. Indonesia at its closest point is only 128 kilometres away from Australia, so we don't have that far to travel. And and where I sit here in Perth, you know, Jakarta is technically closer to me than Sydney. So there are a lot of reasons. I guess, you know, as I say, I've been involved in this process for more than a decade. There was a feasibility study done back in 2007 where this was first contemplated. The road has not always been smooth. There have been some diplomatic tensions, as any near neighbour might experience from time to time. But now on July the 5th, we will have this agreement enter into force finally after a lot of hard work by a lot of people along the way. And I've personally been very privileged to be a part of that, and have formed some very strong relationships as part of that. You know, not only our own organisation, but also as part of the Indonesia-Australia Business Partnership Group, which brings ourselves together with the Australia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the AI Group, and our counterparts in Indonesia, CARDIN, the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Employers Association. You know, being able to work closely with those groups over that period of time has forged some very strong, trusted relationships, which again, as Ivan talks about, that importance of that bridge, you know, that cultural bridge, that understanding in those markets is really critical in making this agreement a success. Because, you know, whilst the agreement launches on the 5th of July, you know, many say we're really just at at the end of the beginning, or the beginning of the, you know, something like that, because it's going to be through the implementation phase that the real benefits from this agreement are realised.
I was going to ask you about that, Phil. So which sectors, I know that Ivan Muni talked about wheat being a zero tariff, which sectors in your mind will benefit the most, and how will that rollout look with the implementation plan?
Well, when you look at the key industries, sectors that Australia trades with Indonesia generally, a lot of them are in agribusiness, food products, in wheat and cattle, also education. But, you know, education has had a tremendous disruption through this COVID-19 situation. So how that rebalances, but with the agreement, there is certainly opportunities now for Australian universities and education providers to take more active role in Indonesia. And again, as Ivan and Muni have talked about, you know, Indonesia's skills, you know, there are a large young population who need skills to exploit the opportunities in their expanding economy, and Australian educational expertise has a great role to play in that. You know, in imported goods, in manufacturing, in tourism. You know, there really are benefits in this agreement across the board, and, you know, the C in IA-CEPA is comprehensive, so it is intended to, you know, embrace much of the economy. And I would also, congratulate Indonesia and Australian governments on finalising this agreement, because, you know, Australia, you know, is quite experienced in developing these sorts of agreements with a range of trading partners, but, you know, Indonesia is relatively new to that, and this agreement is certainly the most ambitious agreement which Indonesia has signed with any country. It gives Australian business, you know, great preferential investment rules, and I guess it's not just in the different industry sectors, but the ability for Australian investors to take a larger stake in different industry sectors, whether it's in healthcare, aged care. Again, back in education, we talked about. I guess it really does come down to individual business to familiarise themselves with the detail of the agreement. It is a very, big document. But the DFAT website, you know, if people Google DFAT IA-CEPA, they'll get all of the information they could possibly need on the agreement, which will drill down into the detail in their particular sectors. And of course, the benefits that come out with reduced tariffs and others, they don't automatically flow to business either. So business will need to prepare themselves, understand those benefits, and, you know, prepare all the appropriate paperwork and documentation and processes they need to tap in.
Great, thanks, Phil. You're right. There's so many, you know, ways to understand that, and I'm sure the ARBC and others will be working closely with industries here to upskill and educate them about what those intricacies are and how they can prepare that through documentation and requirements and so forth in the coming months as well. Phil, I wanted to ask you around, obviously coronavirus, as we've talked about, and, you know, it's sort of been done to death in many ways. It's impacted all of us, but it has in some way actually highlighted that over-dependence on China, well, not in some ways, in many ways, highlighted the over-dependency Australia has had on China. The timing of this IA-CEPA is a really important reminder that as you said, Indonesia is literally on our doorstep. It's a massive market. It has been overlooked for decades, and now is the time with this ratification to rethink it. Has AIBC, as Australian companies start to be released from lockdown, we're getting back into some sort of business functionality and normality, have you been receiving a number of inquiries over the last couple of weeks as people start to re-emerge, if you like?
Absolutely. You know, our phones and emails have been running hot, I guess, with inquiries, which is very encouraging. As I say, you know, for years we've been promoting Indonesia as a destination for Australia, and you know, that diversification of markets. We certainly recognise the dominance and importance of China, and that's not going to change. You know, obviously be some cycles in that. But you know, one of the other things that we've observed through COVID-19 is that international business are themselves looking at removing themselves perhaps from China and their dominance. So other international US-based firms and European firms who may be having established business in China are now looking to Indonesia to relocate or supplement manufacturing capacity in Indonesia. So, you know, with this agreement, apart from, you know, obviously the benefits that are in there, we see the document itself as being a great head-turning opportunity, you know, and with COVID-19, just extra reasons for Australian business to look afresh at Indonesia. And I say look afresh because, you know, a lot of the polling that is done across Australia that asks people about what they know of Indonesia, it's really quite embarrassing how poorly educated people are on Indonesia and what it represents. You know, staggeringly 30+% of Australians will answer that Bali is not even part of Indonesia, and yet 1 million of us go there every year. So there really is a big education piece, and I know Ivan and Ibu Muni and others and ourselves, you know, that's the key role we serve, to promote the relationship, educate people of what the benefit, you know, what the opportunities are, and how to go about you know, tapping into them.
Great. Yeah, I totally agree, Phil. There's a lack of awareness around those opportunities, and one of the things that really excites me about Indonesia is what you've just mentioned and Ibu Muni mentioned as well, is that the opportunity for Australian companies, you don't have to do finished goods, but you can do a value-added program and really partner with some Indonesian companies there to tap into all those neighbouring countries, which again, it's just it's a springboard that is really literally, as you said, on our doorstep.
Yeah. Well, if I could comment on that, Lawrence, you've struck on a key point. You know, we've talked today about the size of the Indonesian market, massive, which is fantastic. But we want to do other things. We really want to see Indonesia and Australian capability come together. And as Ivan mentioned about exporting his goods into the rest of Indonesia, we would see export into the whole of ASEAN, the whole of Asia, whole of the world. So, you know, there are a number of examples of Australian expertise being married with Indonesian manufacturing capability, and again, you know, growing very successful businesses exporting a whole range of products to the world. So, you know, that's the sort of creative, you know, co-investment, working together, partnerships. Again, that P word in IA-CEPA is just so critical. Australia and Indonesia partnering together for mutual success.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much, Phil, for joining us. As I said to the other guests, I'd really love you to be part of future shows, because I do see Indonesia as one of the hot markets, if you like, not just in the short to medium term, but also long term. And as companies start to realise that and wake up to some of these opportunities, they're going to need more advice, more guidance, and I'd love you to be able to be part of that as part of the show going forward. So hopefully you can join us on a regular basis, and next time maybe over in Melbourne, or if we ever do a show over in Perth sometime, that would be nice.
Or maybe even Jakarta sometime, Lawrence. You never know.
Even better. Great.
Thank you.
Always a great chat, Phil, and look after yourself. Look forward to speaking again very soon.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Great. So you've heard there from Phil Turtle, the National President for the Australian-Indonesia Business Council. Coming up after this short break, we're going to be joined by Raffaele Sellaro. He's the Director of MIC Logistics, and as you've heard from our previous guests, there's some really interesting nuances around your supply chain logistics requirements in Indonesia. So we're going to touch on that straight after this break when we're joined by Raffaele.
We all have a big idea.
When I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a builder. Everyone working outside, music playing.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be an ice cream man who offered free refills.
But what does it really take to be an entrepreneur?
You got to have balls.
To be a startup founder, it's definitely not for everyone. It's insanely challenging.
No, balls and brains.
A brand new show to inspire bright ideas.
You know, being really determined and resilient to make it happen.
The show is for people in our position, in the trenches, trying to build a brand.
The real story about startup life from the guys who founded Bay Juice.
The best day of our life with Bay Juice is when Dan Murphy's called us to say we're going to trial your product in store.
There's an insane amount of challenges, but we always see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Ticker Launch with Liam Gostinik and Tim O'Sullivan. Every week on Ticker.
On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Import Export here on Ticker TV. I'm your host, Lawrence Christophels. Today's episode is all about Australian-Indonesia trade opportunities. We're about to ratify between the two countries on the 5th of July the new IA-CEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. And that has got so many opportunities, as we've just heard with the previous three guests. But what it does mean as well is that to understand the supply chain, the logistics requirements, it is very different in many ways to other markets because of the island structure and how you can actually get your goods to and from certain destinations. So now we're joined by the Director of NYC International Logistics, Raffaele Sellaro, over in WA. Hi, Raf, how are you?
Good morning, Lawrence. I'm well. How are you?
Good. Always great to chat with you. Raffaele.
Yeah, thanks for having me this morning.
Great. Raffaele, so many companies are used to doing simple freight forwarding, air freight, sea freight, and that old adage, out of mind, out of sight, out of sight, out of mind is very true when it comes to freight forwarding. And I know that you're always trying to educate and create awareness for your customers about what's really involved when you're dealing with suppliers and how to get product safely, securely, and on time. But can you educate us and give us a bit of awareness, the slight differences, the nuances between logistics in Indonesia, whether it's going in or out by air or sea, versus some of the other bigger markets, or traditional markets, I should say?
Yes, okay. Well, I believe there's a common misconception. Indonesian culture plays a big part in the way they do business, as does Chinese and European culture. It's important to invest the time to understand the culture and respect in the way they do business. Businesses should consider talking to their freight forwarder to discuss local presence, experience in Indonesia to help navigate through the culture barrier. Freight forwarders have strong networks which businesses should take advantage of. So that would be my sort of go-to.
Yeah. And Raffaele, we heard from Ivan Tandyo earlier, one of the great opportunities for Australian companies into Indonesia is around agri-product, food product. She'd talked about the fisheries minister coming through. And there's a great optimism around leveraging some of Australia's logistics supply chain expertise for things like cold chain, even e-commerce, and some new technologies into the infrastructure there. So do you see, how should companies now understand what the limitations are and the different expectations there are in Indonesia? And I'll ask you in a couple of quick ways. So Indonesia, I understand, has got a lot of e-commerce growth, rapid e-commerce growth, which aligns very much with their younger consumer demographic. They buy a lot on WhatsApp. They don't use typically a lot of websites. They really move towards m-commerce versus e-commerce. And that obviously has a big strain and drain on really quick and agile supply chains and logistics. What's your thoughts on that difference between the distribution and fulfillment requirements in Indonesia?
It's true that Indonesia has strongly embraced e-commerce. However, traditional distribution channels from manufacturer to wholesaler to retailer is still well supported to and from this market. So there is a bit of disruption. However, I believe, and from what I see at the moment, those distribution channels are still well strongly supported.
Yeah. And Raffaele, things like products to service so many islands of Indonesia, do companies need to work with you on how to navigate where they should position their stock? I know it's just not a matter of moving cargo from Australia to Jakarta. You need to understand what their sales strategy is, and that's what I love what NYC do, is that as a partnership, you're not just moving freight, you're actually working with the customers about what their needs are and saying, okay, well, what's your end game? How do we service your end game? How do we improve that for your end customer experience? So have you spoken with many companies around understanding the distribution layout and the landscape of Indonesia?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with all countries, it's important not to just go off a great freight rate or good rates. It's all about firstly understanding the supply chain that clients require to and from the volume, the seasonal when it's moving. So understanding those things first, then going back and providing an offer is of great importance. That's what I would suggest. Going just based on a rate or Jakarta to Sydney is very old school, traditional. We need more detail now to make sure that the transparency is there and we all understand what our role is, and as much as the client, suppliers, and us ourselves as freight forwarders as well.
Yeah, and there's often a false negative when it comes to getting cheap freight rates, because at the end of the day, if they haven't actually understood your business, it costs you and your customers more to get the product in anyway. Because
the destination. So.
Yeah, there's the whether you warehouse the stock longer because you've shipped it to the wrong port, or you haven't analysed the requirements. All that at the end of the day impacts on your landed costings and your cost to serve. So, Raf, I wanted to ask you as well. You and I have discussed the impacts of coronavirus on China trade. I know that it had a whole stop moment back in February, then it started to reactivate, then you had to hold cargo here in Australia, and there's things are starting to get back to some sort of normalcy from freight volumes. But with so many countries, including Australia, especially with the recent escalation of some political tensions between Australia and China, have you seen an increase in freight movements so far between Australia and Indonesia? Air freight, sea freight, has that started to sort of spike up a little bit even before the ratification of IA-CEPA?
Honestly, no. There hasn't been I think people are waiting for this, the agreement to be completely signed off, and then from that, investing an interest in Indonesia and other countries, but mainly Indonesia. So at this stage, no, I haven't seen a huge pull towards Indonesia to Australia as yet. People, and from my experience and being in this industry for 22 years, clients and have obviously really strong supply chain in place, and they don't want that disrupted until they can secure another secured supply chain.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about NYC, Raffaele, because I know that most forwarders, they try to sort of stay away from food products, perishable products, project cargo, even DG cargo. And one of the things that is often overlooked is that the capacity of your team with NYC to really look at those, the difficult supply chains really stands you in really strong stead when it comes to servicing companies. So, please tell us a little bit about why MIC can do what others typically stay away from.
We provide a one-stop solution, a one point of contact, a true one point of contact. We don't discourage any imports or any cargo. We welcome any opportunity. So we can service. As a freight forwarder, we should be able to service any particular cargo, regardless if it's DG, perishables, furniture, whatever it might be. So, clients come to us with the assurance that we will provide them with not just competitive pricing, but honesty and transparency. And that's what we do, is just transparency. We all forwarders around the world and multinationals, use each other and use the same shipping lines and use the same air carriers. With us, it's about a personal relationship and transparency and communication.
Yeah, and trust. We've had the word trust thrown around a lot. Well, not thrown around, used very well on today's episode, because it is so important to succeed in international trade. It's equally important to have that trust with your service providers when it comes to trading overseas, because if you can't trust that they're going to get your cargo on the boat or on the aircraft when they say they will, or when, as you and I both know, when things do go wrong, which they will, when it comes to international trade.
Having the right partner to help navigate and give the best advice is of great importance. And when it comes to choosing a freight forwarder, my advice to importers and exporters are to understand the capabilities, like ask all questions possible and not just accept a freight rate. That's my advice.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Raffaele. I think there's so much cost benefit and return on investment to choose the right partner with Indonesia, especially because companies now in Australia and even Indonesia's companies coming into Australia who are watching this episode, they're going to want a partner who can understand both markets but can also handhold them and overcome the communication barriers, the challenges, the documentation requirements. You guys are trusted trading partners as well, which again is a really demonstration of why MYC has got great credentials over and above others. So, what's the best way for companies to, if they're even thinking about getting some simple advice around Indonesia, which port should I look at? Which is are there challenges with air, sea, some of those cold chain fears? Should they just contact you on email or have a call? What's the best way?
I think I like to navigate potential clients or even assist people through to our website, which is www.myclogistics.com. Have a bit of a read about what we do, and then our contact details are there, and they can just reach out to us through that particular channel.
Fantastic, Raffaele. And obviously Indonesia's all about, the episode today is all about Indonesia, but I know MYC covers global, and you've got a whole range of strengths out of Europe and all over Asia and the US as well. So, we're really proud to have you as one of our partners with ATLC, and we really only choose partners who can provide absolute results and strong relationships to our members. So thank you for that. We are looking forward to having you on our show in a number of ways as this Indonesia opportunity starts to unravel and unfold, because we've got so many opportunities that will take place. I'd love to get you back on the show in future months to really discuss how we can look at some sector-based freight supply chain logistics topics as well, Raffaele.
Yeah, I would love that opportunity. Love to be in the studio, definitely. So I'm looking forward to being back in Melbourne as soon as possible.
Yep, it was great to have you back.
Thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Raffaele. So for all of you wanting to find out about managing your cargo, especially from Indonesia, but also just global cargo, check out myclogistics.com. Speak to Raffaele and his team. They won't let you down, and you'll experience a huge difference in service that they offer. So today's episode, hopefully you found that educational, inspiring even, with the opportunities that are abounding with Australia and Indonesia. This IA-CEPA gets ratified on the 5th of July. There are so many changes in global value chains, global supply chains, and even global politics that mean that Indonesia has to be addressed and has to be looked at for all of your inbound sourcing, export opportunities. So look into that, speak to Indonesia Australia Business Council, speak to the Consulate, speak to Navanti Holdings, speak to MYC. You've got a whole team of people who can really help you take advantage of these up and coming opportunities. I hope you found today's episode beneficial. Look forward to seeing you again next week, and we'll see you here, Import Export, on tickertv.com. Thanks very much.
We all have a big idea.
When I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a builder. Everyone working outside, music playing.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be an ice cream man who offered free refills.
But what does it really take to be an entrepreneur?
You got to have balls.
To be a startup founder, it's definitely not for everyone. It's insanely challenging.
No, balls and brains.
A brand new show to inspire bright ideas.
Being really determined and resilient to make it happen.
The show is for people in our position, in the trenches, trying to build a brand.
The real story about startup life from the guys who founded Bay Juice.
The best day of our life with Bay Juice is when Dan Murphy's called us to say we're going to trial your product in store.
There's an insane amount of challenges, but we always see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Ticker Launch with Liam Gostinik and Tim O'Sullivan. Every week on Ticker.
Hey, good morning. Ticker's new breakfast show.
Well, most of the time in the morning, I annoy people.
I think Ben is so fabulous. He is wild, he is warm, he is witty.
The first time I met Alana, I realised I wanted to have a drink with her.
You never know what's going to come out of his mouth.
Kick off your morning with Ticker Jumpstart.
We are playing in uncharted territory.
This preparation takes me all night.
It doesn't matter how long I take, because Ben will always take longer.
Ticker Jumpstart with Benjamin Norris and Alana McLean.
You're going to get some different stuff with us, and we're going to be unapologetic for it.
You do realise it's the morning, so you don't need to be the human coffee.
There are now more ways to watch Ticker. Download our apps for Apple and Android devices. We're live on Twitter and YouTube Live. And you can catch us on Amazon Alexa and Google Home. Head to the Ticker website for more. Introducing Ticker Sport.
Mate, how exciting is it to kick off Ticker Sport?
Mate, I'm as pumped as you, which is pretty pumped. We're here to talk sport, business, there's a market, there's a niche.
It's David Davidovich and Adrian Franklin tackling the biggest issues.
Mate, we're talking sport, but we're talking business as well. And as you know, right now, there is no more important time. The world has changed and we are here to react.
Where nothing's off limits.
This is unprecedented. We've never seen sport ground to a halt like it has. Sport's heading in a completely different direction and we will be at the forefront.
Every Friday, live on Ticker and on demand via the Ticker apps.
Ben, Rob and Robbo. Streaming across the globe, Ben Norris, Rob McKnight and David Robinson. Ben, Rob and Robbo. News, reviews, entertainment news. It's the Ben, Rob and Robbo. Ben, Rob and Robbo Show. Ben, Rob and Robbo Show. The Ben, Rob and Robbo Show, Monday to Thursday at 1 p.m, right here on Ticker TV.